Good day, all, and welcome to the journey. I am Reverend Bobby, and today I have with me my brother in a whole lot of different kind of ways, Morehouse, spiritual, everything. Frank Kid the Third. How are you doing today, Frank?
I'm doing pretty good. I, uh, as I said, I won't complain about anything. I'm thankful to be here another day.
Very good, very good. I think we all could get a little bit of something out of that. And while we get a little bit of something out of that, everybody, remember to subscribe. Gospel of Robert, capital GOSPELOF, capital ROBERT, and that's at YouTube. Might have to put the at sign in there to get to the subscription page, but make sure to subscribe so you get the ding and not miss any good stuff. So, Frank, take a minute and give us, the people, a little bit of a snippet on Frank and who he is.
Okay. Robert, again, as I uh, thank you for having me today. My name, again, is Frank Kidd. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a graduate of Morehouse College with a degree in education and a minor in religion. I taught for many years elementary school here in Cleveland. I'm an associate minister at my church, which is Elizabeth Baptist Church, where Reverend Richard M. Gibson is my pastor.
So when you came out with your degree in education, my daddy was a teacher, my mom was a teacher, grandmama, and education. Education is funny. It's always education and ministers in, the black community, the black family. How did you like teaching? How fulfilling was that for you?
I really enjoyed teaching. Um, I had also been a children's librarian as well.
Hmm.
I enjoyed the classroom very much. My students um, and I took a journey together for approximately 9 months, and we enjoyed each other. I enjoyed imparting information to them so that they would be hopefully productive citizens in society. Uh, Unfortunately, towards the end of my career, I sort of uh, resented education, not uh, from the standpoint of teacher to student, but the petty politics involved in education. You know, in education, as a teacher, you have many colleagues, of course, and the structure of a lead person or principal, if you will. And oftentimes that power struggle to remain creative in the classroom could be stifled for um, the district's hope in you being conformant to the politics of the day. And unfortunately, as I said, towards the end of my career, I found myself in a constant battle every day against the politics of education as opposed to uh, training and promoting learning for children, as I said, to become productive citizens in society.
I think politics. I did school reform here in Chicago,
Mm,
and um, politics gets really steeped into a whole lot of things, and I'm not even going to be trying to pull the cover off of that. But but the children and the parents and um, what do you think happened that got the focus off of educating the children?
Well, I think the standardized test um, for schools to be viewed as well performing took the place of creativity in teaching and in learning. We often felt that we were constantly just teaching towards a test
Yeah, I was going to say that.
and not, instructing the students to be independent, thinkers. I remember having one young lady in my class who raised her hand and asked, generally the test fell in the month of March. And she raised her hand and asked, Mr. Kidd, after we finished taking the test, does that mean school is out? And I said, no, we still got a little ways to go. But that just, uh, showed that they were just totally exhausted, in trying to pass a test instead of, you know, giving them the necessary tools that they would need to function, in a society and be, um, be able to go up against any, other person, be it on a job or through college or whatever their pursuits may have been, that they were just totally exhausted and ready for it to, just be over with.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a tough thing because when you lose that momentum or that willingness to learn, no matter where you lose it, it's hard to get it back. And one thing you said about the kids and over and learning and things, the critical thinking piece in curricula I noticed was had been lacking pretty much after we came through in our time, and it seems to have, um, caused a blockage or a problem with younger people in the way that they think sometimes. Have you seen that to be true also?
Yes, yes, very much. It's, um, I remember, growing up myself and remember the teachers that, invested, in me, um, as a student and to help along, of course, with my family who are very much, into education.
Mm-hmm.
It was like they had a vested interest, beyond just that moment in time that you were going to be with them, that you would be prepared, for the next step. I had friends who taught at the middle school or the junior high school that would often ask their students, "What elementary school did you go to, and who was your teacher?" They could almost pretty much tell they had a teacher who invested not just for that 9 month period, for um, they instilled in them the desire to be lifelong learners and that continue to learn and not feel that, I know everything and, I can't be taught anything, anymore. That oftentimes you'll find adults that'll say, oh, no, they can't teach me anything. I know, everything I need to know, but none of us know, what we're going to be faced with, new challenges that will be faced with throughout our lifetime. But if you have the basic, skills, instilled within you, it's a building block. And, it just continues to build upon, you know, uh, itself as you continue on through the journey of learning.
And Frank, we had a whole lot of support. How would you say, supportive cast characters, not only, through the school, where I grew up. When they built the new school, most of the teachers was in the neighborhood. So they was talking to my mom and them. They be on the fence talking. So you couldn't clown. My daddy had gone to school with some of the teachers. So you couldn't clown. But we also had things like the Boy Scouts. We played baseball for the police department. They would lug us around in the paddy wagons, and when we would stop to get something to eat, they would let us out. The people would run to the other side of the restaurant,
Yeah.
thinking we was hoodlums and stuff. But a lot of that support helped, in the learning situation, because it helped to build the character and things like that. And a lot of those things you don't see no more, man. We just have had a little bit of a tough go, a bump in the road, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I would. I would definitely say that. Even I have two sons myself, and both their mother and I were educators, and I guess they figured, well, I, have a problem. If I have a problem, at school, I know my parents are gonna know about it before I even get back home. But my youngest son was the type that he would challenge you. I remember going up to his school one day and saw him clowning in the line, and just knowing how students are, they were probably saying, "Kyle, here comes your father," and he probably told them, "Oh, so." But when I opened up that door, he was standing in line like he was a tin soldier. He didn't
Yeah,
even look real.
yeah.
And I said, "Okay, I'll see you later when you get home." And so when I got home from school, he was trying to explain himself. And, "Oh, our teacher, taught us some important information today. She told us if we have any problem at home, here's a telephone number that you can call." And I said,
He dropping the hands. Huh? Don't get me too bad.
"Okay." Right. So then when he said, I said, "Oh, I bet you I can tell you what that telephone number is, and you'll probably always remember it since it has your last name included in it." And he
Mm-hmm.
said, "Yeah, 696 kids." I said, "Okay, well, let me tell you how it's going to work when you dial it."
Right, right.
And so he wasn't prepared, but he was that type of child. He was like, "Oh no, I still got to wheedle myself out of this."
My,
And I said, "No, it's not going to work." But the black child, especially a boy, you have one or two choices. Either you can chastise them and love them, or society will get them and kill them.
my daddy was, well, this was later on in his teacher career, because he was in the classroom for a long time. But he was the librarian, but also the disciplinarian for the two social adjustment schools here in Chicago, which is the step before Illinois Youth Commission, which is the step before Department of Corrections.
Oh,
So
okay.
people thought I had an easy life, but I really didn't, because it was about having some discipline about yourself. How important you think that is in the development of children, and in our lives too, when we be trying to go off the rails and stuff.
Yes, it's very important because I always thought while I was in school, although I did my share of cutting up, but I always thought my mindset was, what would my parents think?
Yeah.
What would my grandmother think? You know, and I even took that with me even through college, you
Yeah.
know, the college, you know, as we both did out of state. So there was no one there to, you know, have their thumb, you know, on your neck. But, you know, it sort of, I think, was a moral compass for us to, you know, stay in line, you know, to know that we did have someone that cared at home,
Yeah.
you know, cared enough for us to present our best selves, you know,
Yeah.
because we represent the family, you know. I one thing I didn't like is to be compared with my siblings, who pretty much they all followed the straight and narrow, but I was a trier. So, you know, I tried certain things and, you know, got caught, you know, oftentimes. And they said, now, you know, your parents wouldn't, you know, appreciate that. And, you know, so it, you know, it was always a guiding light, you know, to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, we did grow up with some moral compass. I mean, it was expected of you. You know, anybody in the neighborhood could like fuss at me, you know, give me a pop in the head and get you behind home, and then I'd be terrified because I knew for a
Right.
long they was gonna be calling.
Hmm.
And you know, it wasn't so much that I was cutting up in the street. It was so much somebody else caught me and you acted a fool in the
Right.
street. But we had that ingrained in us, and you know, really, I think it helped in the development of our lives and what we do. What you think, uh, Frank?
Oh, yes. You know, I concur with that. You know, even I taught my sons one of my favorite scriptures, Proverbs 22:1. You know, a good name is far better than silver and gold because that name is going to get you through when nothing else can. You know, that's Frank and Dotta's son. You know, that's Matty Kid's grandson. I remember before coming to Morehouse, my grandmother, she was sort of worried, you know, because I was one to sort of, you know, speak my mind. I just didn't accept, you know, because, um, you know,
You were
somebody
coming.
told
You were coming south from Cleveland.
yes, I was coming
Okay.
to Cleveland and had never been there before, didn't know anything about it other than the stories, you know, that my grandparents told. My paternal parents, you know, growing up, I had my grandmother, my great grandmother, my great great grandmother, and my great grandfather.
Hmm.
And, you know, they all lived, you know, in the same house. And so on Sundays, when we would go to that house, you know, they would, you know, tell us stories about
Yeah.
their growing up and, you know, that it wasn't always easy just to be yourself or to speak your mind. You know, you had to reserve, you know, oftentimes how, you know, you really felt about things and, you know, took a lot behind it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, you know, those stories. But you know, sort of found my way, you know, as I got there. And I was always, again, I represented, you know, my family that was here, you know, in Cleveland. So I always tried to keep, you know, myself, you know, steadfast in what my purpose of being there was, and that was to get a degree,
Yeah.
you know, and to come back home and contribute, you know, to my family.
You said something about earlier in the education and contributing to the young people being a contributor to society when they get older, and this is what even though you were teaching them math or reading or whatever, but this was the thing behind you teaching them. How much of a difference in that kid's development do you think was helpful from that kind of attitude you have versus just coming in, doing your job, and going home?
I think it really meant a lot because I had some students. Um, I remember one young man, um, he ended up repeating the grade. I think I had him, the teacher that had him before me, if a child repeated, the same teacher couldn't have,
Right.
the student. So I got him the next year. And I remember him telling me, he said, "Mr. Kidd, you're the only one that, you know, act like you really cared, about me, not just when I was in your classroom, but what did you do for the weekend, you know?" And it was surprising to me, because you had the separation of church and state. So, I was a church, you know, kid and, still today. And, kids recognize, the sincerity of their teachers if they really care or if they're just, I used to didn't like the same when adults would tell kids, "Well, I got mine, you have to get yours." No, if it hadn't been for some teachers who invested, in me, my receiving the necessary things I needed, you know, could have been null and void.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned something about your most people in the neighborhood or your teachers knew your family. Well, the same with mine. A lot of people knew my father, and I'm named after my father, and he after his father, and I have a son named after me. So it means something, when you have a family name that's recognizable. There's certain expectations, that people have of you. And it's not a bad thing to have a good name, you find that many doors, I found that many doors were open to me, because of the family and the upbringing in which I had.
We were talking about, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, but we were talking about name and upbringing and the relationship that you build, throughout life with people, with teachers and stuff. Mommy was coming back from Spelman one time, and one of the stewardesses was in her kindergarten class eons ago. Miss Yarborough made mommy feel all good and stuff. Do you get a lot of that,
Oh, yeah.
going around? I know you do. I'm just being facetious. Tell me about how that make you feel.
Oh, it's a tremendous feeling because education can appear to be a thankless position. And when you have kids that'll see you out or here, like Facebook, "Are you this kid? Did you used to teach at so and so, so and so? And you were one of my favorite teachers. I learned a lot." I had a young man that was in my class, and his parents were very nice, very supportive young parents. And he saw me one day out at one of the stores, and he went back home and told his parents, "I saw Mr. Kidd out at Saks Fifth Avenue." And he just got a kick out of it. I said, "Well, if I were to see him today, I would tell him I'm at the thrift store," whatever. But it was important. In fact, I had, I don't know if you remember her or not. She might have been gone from Spelman at the time, but she worked at my high school. And my sister and I both worked. She was the head of English department,
Mm-hmm.
and her name was Pauline Drake.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Drake ended up coming back to Spelman, and she was the only person that I knew in Atlanta when when I got there. And that relationship from my high school years continue to this day that I
Now,
still in touch.
how did you feel coming south from Cleveland? Probably the first time you've been away from home for an extensive period of time. How did that sit with you as a young man?
Oh, I loved it. I just,
Yeah,
like I tell people, there's nothing like HBC
yeah,
school,
yeah,
Morehouse in particular. I think the professors there, one of their goals was to make sure that you were going to get through, that process. They were going to do anything within their power, to make sure that you were nurtured and cared for while you were there. And it was one of the best experiences I have ever had, in my life. I wouldn't trade it for anything,
yeah.
that it, I believe, helped shape the person I am to this day.
Yeah, me and my guys, we used to call it, well, number one, the dream factory, because
Hmm.
you had space to
Right.
dream. But what I was telling them at reunion was, we was the answer to many dreams, and we was
Yeah.
the answer to many prayers. Today we walk, through those gates that we was totally unaware of at the time, and
Yeah.
a very unique
Hmm.
situation, man. And you were saying how good that unique situation was for you. Give me one or two examples as we ramping down our journey for today.
Okay. One thing I remember, I before coming to Morehouse, I was straight out of high school, and I ended up getting hit by a car,
Mhm.
and so that sort of put things on a halt. Many of my friends went on, to college ahead of me. And I often felt like when I was able, to go to school, that I felt like I was always behind. Or I
Mhm.
was always trying to play catch up,
Mhm.
meeting new friends, um, being away from home, and I'm sort of an observer when it comes to meeting new people. I'm going to sit back and evaluate the situation before I allow myself to, be immersed into friendships or things like that. And it, I think one of the things that um, taught me to be a thinker, to think things through, not just for the moment, but what is the lasting effect, going to be, in my life and, for me as I move forward. And even to this day, like I ask myself sometimes, can you call a person your friend, say on this Facebook platform, a person that you've never met in person, you've only, maybe chatted, and many of us, built relationships beyond that. And it, is a great feeling to have a support system, where,
Yeah.
you can have a conversation with a person just for 10 minutes or an afternoon and feel like you've known this person, all of your life,
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and that they haven't invested, you know, relationship like you and I, we, exchange messages, scriptures, conversations, talk about Morehouse. You're an outlaw. I'm a renegade, in that. And these relationships are important, especially as we get older,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and they mean a lot.
But just and this goes for you especially, just in the fact where I could have a dialogue with someone, an exchange of information
Yeah.
instead of, those things where people sit on the edge of their seat to just say whatever they got to say, but a real true exchange of information. And I'm very grateful and I thank you for that. But we're just about out of time, everyone. So, Frank, you going to come back and do another one
Oh,
time?
most definitely.
Well, thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you, Frank Kidd III, for joining me today. I am Reverend Bobby. Don't forget, subscribe. Gospel of Robert, capital GOSPELOF, capital ROBERT, one, no spaces, and you might have to put the @ sign in front of it to get to the page to subscribe to the station. I'm working all those things out. But for me and Frank Kidd, on the journey today, we pray, hope, wish, and demand from the universe that
Yes.
you journey well from here on. Peace.
Amen.